Hello, everyone. Welcome to join Juniper AMA session, where we have experts to answer your questions, any questions related to Cloud Metro. Today, we have the experts, Amit Bhatwaj, Peter Chang, and Vasily Mokin. And for how you can raise your question is there's a Q&A box in your panel, and then you just click it and type your questions and submit, and we'll be able to see, and I'll be your moderator to ask those questions on your behalf, and then we'll have the experts to answer. All right, let's see. The first question is, let's see. Okay, the first one, very much aligned with this month's theme, is that Cisco has announced the end of sale, end of life, and end of support for their legacy Catalyst 6500 and the 7600 series. And Juniper suggests to use the A6 7000 to replace it. So compared to these two series, how does the A6 7000 compare to them in terms of feature parity? Peter, maybe you can answer this question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Irene. So definitely, right? So the overall Cisco deployment for the Cisco Catalyst 6K or 7600 is quite well deployed, right? So the company announced the end of sale approximately 4 years ago, and subsequently gradually to announce the end of life support. So you look at the particular on the Catalyst, this 6K, right? So it pretty much built in the campus backbone. And customer using this one to do the port channel, MC lag, to do a dual homing. Basically, it's play the role for the core to play the particular on the high capacity, on the Ethernet density, on the 1 gig, 10 gig in the kind of 10 years ago. So right now, in the certain point, these two outstanding products is reached end of life support. So certainly a lot of the further enterprise need to quickly looking for the replacement. With the replacement, I think the very first consideration is what will be the very cost-effective box. Do they support a deep buffer? And more importantly, right, a lot of customer is looking for high density of 100 gig, even for 400 gig for the future. So with this kind of the mix of the combination on the feature, so very naturally, right, the Juniper announced the ACS7K in particular for 1 IU, we equipped with the Jericho 2 to equip with the 4.0 terabit. Will very, very naturally fit. So we already see the customer is really looking for very simple migration, high density 100 gig, Ethernet port channel, layer 2, layer 3 PBN, not looking for very super size on the service provider grade of the high scale on the FIP table. So this is a very simple box swap, and you could continue using the MC lag port channel. But in the meantime, right, if customer more looking forward, I say, hey, I like to have some certain visibility or planning, thinking about the EVPN for my next gen of the fabric, next gen of architecture, or even introduce a second routing. This platform able to give you the inverse protection. So this kind of the migration, right? We already see momentum. We see the customer just do a very simple swap, and we are happy to share the example here. And that's pretty much, I think this is the very easy migration path. So talk to your sales organization, sales folks, right? So we could provide the detail of the feature by feature. And more importantly, right, this box itself, particularly on ACS7K, based on the most advanced of the merchant silicon on the Jericho 2, combine all the parameters, is the perfect box for the migration. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then there's a follow-up question. But Cisco has already been suggesting using the NCS 5500 or 5700 or the ASR 9K or even the latest 8000 series to replace this legacy series. So why Juniper?
Certainly, this is a very good question, right? So certainly we are Juniper have the very outstanding reputation on the leading of our Juno infrastructure. So there's no question in terms of the software quality, stability, even for the leadership on the MPLS and EVP and second routing, there's no question Juniper is leading on that. And it's quite important to keep in mind, right? So the ACF5500 is based on the previous generation of the merchant silicon. So you will see certain of the, it's quite decent, okay, on the deploy in the metro space, right? But if you carefully review overall of the limitation, right, it certainly limits a lot of use cases down the road for your future and the next generation of metro. So stay with 5500, you will immediately see the roadblock for the Jericho base of the limitation on the second routing label depth, or you like to have an equal path of the certain of the backup paths to require the fake ECMP. So a lot of limitation really limit your future. I think probably could give, or Vasily could give more detail what's the cloud fundamental requirement. Especially from Vasily could probably repeat what's the slicing will be needed, what kind of QoS. So those kind of the next gen cloud base of the metro certainly require of the next gen. Yeah, of course, right? Cisco 357 is also based on Jericho 2, but you need to keep in mind, right? The very important is the Cisco pretty much is the shift their direction from the merchant silicon to their in-house. So certainly they already downplay their investment on the 57 family. And you need to keep in mind, right? The key success for Metro is very important. You need to have a different skill, different form factor, different optimization on your capacity, bandwidth. You need a high density, 1 gig, 10 gig, 25 gig, or you like to maximize for 100 gig, ZR optics. So those kind of combination, you need to build up your foundation is rich hardware portfolio. And certainly Cisco is changing their direction. And in the complete opposite, Juniper is just pick up this kind of the strategy. This year, next year, even the 23, we have a rich hardware portfolio. So basically, you could benefit for all the story we are leading right now. And basically, based on what the architecture we are proposed, you could have an end-to-end story. You have an end-to-end slicing. You have an end-to-end of the invest protection. And more importantly, right, so Cisco 8000 product family is, as today, their generation for the chipset. It's very purpose-built for the core and period. So certainly you have to wait a lot of new generation chipset, 2 to 3 year, even 4 year, 5 year of the new developing, SDK developing on the Cisco 8000 in order to limit the current status of the metro requirement. So it's a very simple compare, right? So once you have an immediately capacity grow, new generation of the cloud metro, certainly stay with Juniper will be the best choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next question, Juniper talks about Cloud Metro. How is the Juniper Cloud Metro or the Cloud Metro different than the traditional typical Metro or Metro Ring?
Thanks, Irene. I think, we started calling the Metro as a Cloud Metro, looking at the inflection points coming for in the market, both for service providers and for the cloud providers. Because typically the metro network is what we call as access and aggregation, which means, traffic's coming into the access aggregation, and everything is basically backhaul to the edge, and all the services are delivered at the edge of the network. When we start to look at what are the inflection points, while some of the legacy backhaul services will continue for broadband, for business VPN, and for mobile, but there's a big trend that's coming is that the cloud itself is moving into the metro. And the workloads that are going to be delivered in this cloud in the metro are, first of all, the networking workloads. Some of them are coming from the mobile. They're coming from, like broadband, like virtualization of CMTS. They're coming from a business perspective with some of the, SD-WAN solutions. So more and more networking workloads start to get virtualized. On top of that, there will be low latency workloads, high bandwidth workloads that will be hosted in the metro locations. And some of these will be hosted by the service providers. Some of these will be hosted by the big cloud providers. So you start to look at metro and say, okay, what does the new metro look like? The new metro, it looks like where you have service providers, you have cloud providers, and it brings new opportunities in the ecosystem where the metro network needs to not just the backhaul services like a traditional model to the edge, but also steer the services where exactly the application is deployed in the metro. So this is why we call our new metro solution as the Cloud Metro. And going back to the previous question, this is one of the big value that Juniper is bringing to the table, is this vision of taking the metro and virtualizing the number of functions in the metro and allowing the deployment of this kind of network, not just from a network element standpoint, but also from an automation standpoint. Because as we get into this, some of the technologies like network slicing, traffic assurance, real-time assurance, these all are going to be critical from an automation standpoint. And this new Cloud Metro it's a combination of things that we do on the box with Junos and Evo. And by the way, that's one of the best operating systems, because it's well proven with MX and PTX. Now it's being also proven on ACX, and it's going to have the components of MX from a custom silicon standpoint, and it's going to have the automation components, with the Paragon systems.
Thank you, Amit. All right, next question. You mentioned slicing. So how is network slicing implemented in the metro network?
So let's see, what are the drivers of the network slicing, first of all, right? A lot of people talk about network slicing in the context of 5G, because in the 5G in the radio domain, the spectrum will get sliced for different use cases. But in the end, the slicing has to be end-to-end. So you're going to slice in your RAN domain, you're going to slice in your mobile core domain, but in the middle is the metro network. It also needs to prepare the slices in the network for those use cases. But from a metro network, the problem statement is a lot bigger than that. There is this use cases that are coming from a 5G perspective, but also we're converging a number of different services onto the common network. We're converging broadband services, we're converging business services, we're going to converge a lot of IoT use cases, right, onto the metro network. So how do we use a common one single network, which is a converged network, and slice that network along these different use cases, right? And this is the value of network slicing, is that let's take the common network and do it very elegantly. We've done this before. So just to be clear, the slicing is not exactly a new technology when you take it from a network perspective, because you have things like VPNs and RSVPTE tunneling that exist before. What's really new in this technology, really in this network slicing, as Juniper's bringing to the market, is that all of this stuff is going to be very elegantly done in terms of automation. The underlays will be provisioned, the overlays will be associated with them, the SLAs will be met and will be provisioned across the network, monitored, and the assurance will be automated along with that. So when you create a slice in the network for all these use cases, it's going to meet the SLA required, and if it's not meeting it, it's going to take the action to meet that SLA required. So it's driving all the things we said. Cloud Metro is going to be more complex. Yes, it's going to be more complex, but network slicing is what's going to make it simplification of driving the Cloud Metro network.
Thank you, Amit. Next question: what's the advantage of Spineleaf architecture versus Ring for metro network?
Okay, let me probably take this one. So first of all, there are a few angles how we can take a look into this. I think that from the past, we know that the throughput of the kind of Spineleaf or star topology always better than the Ring. So the star topology or V-shaped topology, whatever we call it, provides way better and easier setting up resiliency in this type of topologies. That's one thing. Second thing, which I think that what the question was inspired with, is that introducing the overall the Spineleaf as part of the metro story, but also as part of an attribute of the cloud provider network, right? So this is let's say future and bulletproof type of topology, which is easily automated. So it is symmetric. It is easily scale out, so you can grow and add new network elements, more port capacity, more throughput as at the moment when you need it, right? And yeah, and I think it works really well in the metro infrastructure as well. And maybe another question is why it is now works better than it works before. Well, topology, because star topology is a star topology. And to add one thing here, that probably the economics of the network platforms is more suitable now for building the scale out architectures, right? So we have the new platforms with the lower cost per port, per bit, etc. So which makes it reasonable from economics perspective. And the last thing, so I think that the transition will happen not instantaneously. So we'll see with time more and more Spineleaf architectures. But the actual solution will include a combination of a Spineleaf, which will aggregate also rings, and I think it will pretty coherent solution, especially with suggesting the IP service fabric, which separates pretty well the physical topology from the logical transport and the service layer topology.
Thank you, Vasily. Next question.
Peter,
you want to add?
I could provide one additional. I think it's very well said by Vasily, say our IP fabric, right? So basically, you could see the trends on the mobile operator. So basically, even though my existing topology on the backhaul side is still in ring topology, but I like to build up my infrastructure with my data center is leaf and spine. So basically, this kind of synergy of the two different type of topology, but using a common architecture of technology. So only based on the overall IP fabric, you could choose the EVPN as a good example, combine second routing. So your application have a visibility from not just for end to end, but for overall the synergy and the single automation tool to provision a service is really powerful. So the technology evolving is beneficial from the overall the cost goes down quite dramatically. I think right now the pizza box, right, would provide much better option from compared to the traditional. Some customer would prefer of the chassis base, right? So basically, their redundant is from the chassis. You need a dual IE or anything, now become the fabric to spin out. So this will provide much better and overall articulation of the traffic engineering. Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Next question. What to use to manage the A6 device?
Okay, so I think that the question is pretty much generic, isn't it? But as part of the Cloud Metro story, as Amit mentioned, so the automation becomes a pretty essential piece, right? So the whole solution comes packaged with the automation suite, which includes multiple software modules. In case of Juniper, so it comes with is known as the Paragon automation suite. So which is the recommended way to manage not only ACX series as a single standalone element, but overall as the automation suite, which provides all the necessary, let's say, components of the solution, including managing the slicing, including managing the active assurance, provisioning and instantiating services, well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, so the Paragon automation suite plus Anuta Atom, which is our third-party product from our partner, is two major management off-box elements which are recommended for Metro network based on the ACX series platforms.
As a follow-up question, how is the Juniper Metro automation different than the typical device FCAP management and ZTP?
I guess that the first thing it's different in the essence of or in the definition by itself. It's so we're coming not with the concept of management, but rather with the concept of automation. The FCAPs and the ZTP standard thing, or some other elements of maybe automation which you can find on box and which always were part of the Junos operating system. It is inclusive into the Juniper automation suite. On top of it, as I briefly mentioned, so we're providing the full complex to establish and manage the slicing in the metro network to enable the service assurance, which is just an integral part of the solution. So integral part of the workflow to instantiate service in your network, meaning that once you establishing your L3 VPN across the multiple network devices, like for example, in case of the mobile backhaul or 5G xHaul use cases, so the system will automatically generate the both certificate for this L3 VPN services based on the service level objectives, which were entered into the system during the service definition. And those service objectives, just as an example, can be service minimum bandwidth allowed to the service, minimum latency, packet drop, etc. So all these elements will be validated at the time of the service instantiated, and only after that the service will be brought into the operating states and production. Another important difference is, of course, the closed loop automation. So it's important to follow your service level objectives, not only the time of the service instantiation, but also during the operational hours. So the closed loop automation will allow to collect different KPIs from network and make proactive decisions about the rerouting traffic as required through the new path to make sure that the service objectives or service level objectives stays within the thresholds which will define in the service definition time. Yeah.
Thank you, Vasily. All right. Next question. The Juniper A67100 used the same Jericho 2 chipset, just like Arista and the Cisco NCS 5700. So is there any real difference?
Yeah, I'd love to answer this question, right? So yes, it's true, right? So there's a couple of vendors using the same merchant silicon chipset to implement their Metro box, right? But it's quite important to recognize, right? So we come from the very starting point to position this box as Cloud Metro. So basically, we kind of reverse engineer a little bit to figure out what kind of important for us. And that important for us is how to maximize the overall of the chipset capability. On top of that, we build on our Juno, Evo will become the differentiator. So there's a couple of the key criteria we could highlight here, right? So yes, even though all the vendors using the same merchant silicon, but there's just slightly different, right? How to optimize their interface. So even though the Jericho 2 provide 96 of the interface, Jericho 2C support different variation of the 25 gig and 10 gig of the interface, right? So basically, we come up with different script to optimize the overall front panel and extremely make sure the power consumption will be efficient. So we are better on this one parameter. The second thing is we recognize, right? So all the ZR plus, right, is become the important for the Metro, be overcome the traditional, the distance not able to do on the fiber side. So able to have every port to power on the ZR plus is really important. So unlike our competitor, their power supply only to power on only half or very limited. Our design is make sure every port you could turn on the ZR plus. So basically, this part could be really effectively to position any role of the Metro you like to have. Everybody talk about the same of the deep buffer. Yes, because the design, the benefiction compared with the Broadcom chipset they are positioned here, this is kind of day one will be used for the deep buffer. And in terms of deep buffer, you need to recognize additional work to more smart way to do the tail drop. It will significantly will help you to do the burst traffic management. So what's that mean? If you're backhaul, you have very low speed of the 1 gig from your access box, you have 100 gig for uplink. This kind of very asymmetric of traffic, how to do the very smart way, per flow awareness, we do the implement. Okay, and besides on the network slicing, Vasily just highlight while the vision automation, of course, we continue to drive the leadership here. And it's also quite too important is what's the foundation? So the foundation on the operation that we are based on the most advanced, the EVO. And the EVO is in combined with 64 gig of memory, will give you have the room to grow your metro space, right? So once you'd like to have a host a third-party application, you like to have the growth on your FIP table size, and best way for the telemetry, we make sure our memory size will be big enough for your future of the inverse protection. Same thing, we provide a dual SSD, right? So SSD is typical, have only a lifetime read and write. And we see the case, there's some software bug, right? It just continue read and write. So continue, the box is just way out in one day. So need to IMA. So we pay extra cost to a hard design to do a dual SSD to make sure overall of the box and system could be robust. So, and the least one is we recognize the metro, the different location, the capacity demand will be different. So how to optimize the cost for customer is really important. So we come out of pay-as-you-go license, right? So you could just find the box you would like to have the capacity and just gradually pay the license fee per your traffic growth, right? So you can optimize your OPEX and pay and down the road, right? So combined loss factor, right? Yes, everybody using the same forwarding exit, but the true value is on the very detail on the box design, the operating system, our end-to-end solution, driven by the automation we are leading here, is really bring an additional milestone on the value we are trying to bring here. Yeah. So we are very excited and proud for this portfolio, and I think this is quite important to recognize, right? So if you have any competition situation, and this is not just for the competition purpose, right? It's really, we recognize what's the cloud metro needed. We recognize what's for the next gen. We recognize for your 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road. Those key problems have the good foundation built in day one. It's extremely important, and we did it. Yeah, and we will continue to do it in the new Huawei portfolio as well. Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Last question. What are some of the new requirements for the metro network for 5G other than just faster and bigger?
Okay, let me take this one. So I think that one of the distinctive requirements for the 5G is of course requirements on the class of service side and requirements for the ultra low latency. And this type of capability actually both the super accurate timing and synchronization and the low latency comes from the fact that so we're delivering a new subset of platforms which Pierre just mentioned very in quite of details. So both capabilities are there, and so with that we're able to accommodate any 5G use cases. Maybe another key thing, but maybe less important than what I've mentioned, is of course the logical scale. So we'll see that the 5G use cases most probably will be accompanied with the other use cases. So meaning that there are other services which need to be delivered. So your box should be able to deliver multiple different services at the same time. Provide the adequate amount of access layers or firewall filters in case of Juno's devices, and be able to deliver layer 2, layer 3 capabilities at the same time with again adequate scale and performance.
Thank you, Vasily. Peter, Amit, anything you want to add?
No, I think it's a very great discussion, right? So we kind of give you the context of the direction, solution, and we give you the building block for the Huawei portfolio and the overall solution and automation. Yes, we are confident and we are excited to join this journey.
Amit?
Yeah, I think this is, this is Metro in a way is going to be the hub of the innovation both for both service providers and the cloud providers. I mean, like we covered in the main presentation, I mean, it's a change in a way, right? Because it's a change in the sense that the end goal here is going to drive a lot of number of new use cases, and then also could be is an because you can continue with the current use cases, which are mostly related to backhaul, and on top of that, bring new use cases onto this piece of the network through as the cloud starts to move into the metro. And that's basically, I think, the central piece of this topic is how service providers can go into this transformation journey while they're doing what they're doing and invest into a network and the automation solution, which will help them get there, right? So that's the most important thing, which we have covered in this Cloud Metro session.
Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for your questions. And now come to the end of this session. Thank you to all the subject matter experts for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thank you, everybody.